Think about this. Have you ever felt the intensity of someone's desire for you, yet they remain silent? You see it in their eyes, in their energy, in the way they linger just a little too long, and yet nothing, no words, no actions, just silence. Why? Because craving and action are not the same. The paradox of desire and silence. When a person craves something deeply, it doesn't always lead to pursuit. Sometimes it triggers the exact opposite, withdrawal. The human mind is designed to protect itself from perceived threats, and ironically, the deeper the desire, the greater the fear. Fear of vulnerability. We are not just dealing with emotions, we are dealing with a nervous system conditioned for survival. If he craves you, that means you have power over him. And power is risky. What if he shows his heart and you reject it? What if he loses control? So instead he stays silent, because silence feels safer than exposure. Subconscious programming. Most of our emotional responses aren't even conscious. They are programs running beneath awareness. Maybe he grew up in an environment where emotions were suppressed. Maybe he learned that love equals pain. Maybe the last time he felt something this intense, it ended in heartbreak. So his subconscious does what it has always done: retreat. The brain's survival mechanism. Desire, at its core, activates both pleasure and pain. The moment he realizes how much he wants you, his brain also warns him this is dangerous, because deep connection requires surrender, and surrender means giving up control. So his mind takes over. Silence becomes his escape route. The Energy You Project. Now here's where it gets interesting. The way you respond to his silence determines everything. If you chase, if you demand answers, if you seek validation from him, his subconscious reads that as pressure, and pressure triggers avoidance. But when you embody self-worth, when you stand in your power, when you shift your energy from seeking to being, the dynamic changes. He feels that shift. He feels the absence of your need, and suddenly his fear has nowhere to run. Breaking the cycle. So the question isn't why is he silent? The question is, why are you listening to his silence instead of your own energy? The moment you stop waiting for an answer from him and start giving yourself the love, the attention, the validation you crave, you become the magnet. Because the truth is, silence is not rejection. Silence is fear. And when you stop feeding that fear, you'll be shocked at what happens next. The choice is yours. When someone deeply desires you but remains silent, it creates a paradox that feels almost impossible to understand. Shouldn't craving lead to action? Shouldn't a person who longs for you reach out, make a move, do something? But in reality, the human mind doesn't always work that way. Desire is not just about attraction, it's about emotional intensity, and the more intense the feeling, the greater the internal conflict. The mind, designed for survival, doesn't just process longing, it also calculates risk. What if expressing this desire leads to rejection? What if showing too much emotion makes them vulnerable? What if stepping forward results in pain? For some, craving leads to pursuit, but for others, especially those conditioned by past wounds, desire triggers withdrawal. The intensity of wanting something or someone so deeply can feel overwhelming, even threatening. Instead of stepping into the fire of vulnerability, they pull away into silence, where they feel they have control. The paradox is this: the more they crave, the more they fear. And the more they fear, the more they resist. Not because they don't want you, but because wanting you is a risk they aren't sure they can take. Vulnerability is one of the most terrifying experiences for the human mind. It requires openness, surrender, and the willingness to be seen without armor. But for many, especially those who crave deep connection, vulnerability feels like standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure if they will be caught or if they will fall. Silence becomes the escape. It is the shield that protects them from exposure, from the possibility of rejection or emotional pain. The more they feel drawn to you, the more the fear intensifies. What if they're not enough? What if they show you their deepest feelings only to be met with indifference? What if giving in to this desire means losing control? For someone who equates vulnerability with weakness, silence feels like safety. It's a way to manage emotions without confronting them. Instead of expressing what they feel, they withdraw. Not because they don't want you, but because wanting you makes them feel powerless. They would rather sit in the discomfort of silence than risk the pain of rejection. But the irony is that silence itself is a form of suffering. The longing doesn't disappear, it lingers, it festers, it grows in the spaces between what is said and what is left unsaid. And so they remain stuck, caught between craving and fear, unsure whether to step forward or retreat even further. The way a person responds to desire and connection is rarely just a conscious decision. It is a deeply ingrained pattern, shaped by past experiences, childhood conditioning, and subconscious beliefs. From a young age, the brain absorbs lessons about love, attachment, and emotional safety, often without us realizing it. If someone was raised in an environment where emotions were dismissed, love was conditional, or vulnerability was met with pain, their subconscious mind learns that deep connection is dangerous. When they crave someone, it activates not just feelings of attraction, but also buried fears and unresolved wounds. Their mind starts running an old, familiar program, one that tells them that opening up leads to rejection, that love is unpredictable, or that emotional exposure means losing control. Even if, on a conscious level, they want to move toward you, their subconscious is wired to protect them, and sometimes protection looks like withdrawal. This is why someone can deeply want you yet remain silent. It's not a matter of whether they care. It's a matter of whether their subconscious allows them to act on what they feel. Until they recognize and rewire these patterns, they will continue responding to desire with hesitation, not because they choose to, but because their mind is operating on an outdated script that tells them silence is safer than vulnerability. The brain is not wired for love. It is wired for survival. Every experience, every emotional response, every decision is filtered through one fundamental question: is this safe? When someone feels an intense craving for another person, their brain doesn't just register attraction, it also assesses the potential threat. Desire, at its core, is unpredictable. It invites uncertainty, the possibility of rejection, the loss of control. And the brain, especially when shaped by past emotional wounds, perceives uncertainty as danger. The moment someone realizes how much they want you, their survival instincts activate. Instead of leaning in, they may pull away, not because they don't want you, but because their nervous system is trying to protect them from perceived emotional risk. This is why some people retreat into silence when they crave someone deeply. Their brain equates vulnerability with exposure, exposure with risk, and risk with pain. Even if the conscious mind is telling them to move forward, the deeper, more primal part of the brain is saying, stop. Stay safe, stay in control. But here's the paradox. The very act of withdrawing creates more suffering. Suppressing desire doesn't make it disappear, it amplifies it, turning it into an internal war between craving and self-protection. The silence isn't rejection, it's a defense mechanism, a signal that their mind is battling between wanting you and fearing what that want could mean. Energy is the unspoken language that dictates human connection. Long before words are exchanged, before actions are taken, energy speaks. It influences how people respond to you, often in ways they don't consciously understand. When someone craves you but remains silent, Their subconscious is attuned not just to your words or actions, but to the energy you project. If your energy leans towards seeking validation, needing reassurance, or waiting for them to act, it can trigger their survival instincts. The subconscious reads this as pressure, and pressure often leads to retreat. It's not about you doing anything wrong, it's about how unbalanced energy creates an invisible push and pull dynamic. The more you reach energetically, the more they may withdraw, because deep down, their craving for you already feels overwhelming, and any additional intensity can feel like too much to handle. But the moment you shift your energy from seeking to being, everything changes. When you embody self-worth, when your energy says, I am whole with or without you, something in them wakes up. The silence they once used as a shield begins to feel empty, and suddenly they find themselves drawn towards you, not because you chased them, but because your energy no longer gave them something to run from. The way you hold yourself, the way you own your presence, the way you radiate a sense of completeness, this is what alters the dynamic. Because energy is magnetic, and when you stop pulling, they feel the space you've created. And in that space, they have to face what they've been running from all along. The cycle of craving and silence is not just about them, it's about you. It's about the pattern that keeps playing out, the unspoken expectations, the energetic dance that repeats itself over and over. You may find yourself wondering why they aren't reaching out, why their desire isn't enough to override their fear. But the real question is, why are you waiting for their actions to give you clarity instead of creating your own? Breaking the cycle doesn't mean forcing them to speak, demanding answers, or chasing what feels out of reach. It means turning inward and shifting the energy within yourself. When you stop seeking external validation and start embodying self-worth, everything changes. Their silence no longer becomes a mystery to decode or a wound to heal. It becomes irrelevant to your sense of wholeness. And in that shift, something powerful happens. The moment you stop waiting for them, they feel it. The energy they once ran from is no longer pulling at them. The space you create forces them to confront their own fears, because without your constant presence, without your energy leaning in, they have to face what's inside them. This is when they realize that silence doesn't protect them, it isolates them. And suddenly the craving that once kept them at a distance now pulls them toward you. But by then, something within you has changed. You're no longer just waiting for them to break their silence. You've already broken free from the need for an answer. Because the truth is, the cycle was never about them. It was about you reclaiming your power. And when you do, the dynamic shifts. Not because you pushed, but because you finally let go. If he creates you, why is he silent? The truth will shock you. Have you ever felt the intensity of someone's desire for you, yet they remain silent? You see it in the way they look at you, in the energy they project, in the hesitation in their voice, and yet, instead of stepping forward, they retreat. They say nothing. They do nothing. Why? Because craving is not the same as action. We assume that when someone wants something badly enough, they will go after it. But human behavior is not that simple. The mind is wired for survival, not love. And for many people, deep desire triggers deep fear. They want you, but they are afraid of what wanting you means. Fear of vulnerability and silence. For some, craving someone is not just about attraction, it is about exposure. To acknowledge their feelings would mean to risk rejection, to lose control, to step into the unknown, and for a mind conditioned to avoid pain, vulnerability feels like danger. So instead, they withdraw. They sit in silence, convincing themselves that avoiding their feelings is safer than facing them. But avoidance does not erase desire. It only buries it beneath fear. Subconscious programming. And that fear is rarely new. It is an echo of the past. Their silence is not just about you, it is about the patterns they have lived with for years. If they have been hurt before, if they have learned that love is uncertain or that emotions are a weakness, their subconscious is trained to protect them from repeating that pain. So even if they crave you, even if their heart pulls them toward you, their mind tells them to step back. And until they become aware of that programming, they will continue to run without even realizing why. The brain's survival mechanism. Desire is not just emotional, it is biological. It activates both pleasure and pain centers in the brain. And for someone who is afraid of losing control, silence feels like self-preservation. The moment they feel the pull toward you, their nervous system warns them, this could be dangerous. What if you get hurt? What if you lose yourself? So they freeze, they retreat into silence, mistaking emotional protection for safety. But what they don't realize is that avoiding their feelings does not protect them, it only prolongs their suffering. Because silence does not erase connection, it only delays the inevitable. The Energy You Project. But here's the truth. The way you respond to their silence determines everything. If you lean in, if you chase, if you try to decode their hesitation, you reinforce their fear. Your energy tells them they still have control over the situation, that they can stay in silence and you will still be there waiting. But the moment you shift, the moment you stop waiting, the moment your energy says, I am whole, with or without you, something changes. They feel it. They sense the absence of your pull. And suddenly, the very silence that once felt safe now feels empty. People do not crave what they already have. They crave what they fear they might lose. Breaking the cycle. So the question is not, why is he silent? The question is, why are you listening to his silence instead of your own energy? The moment you stop seeking answers from them and start focusing on yourself, the dynamic shifts. Because the truth is, the cycle was never about them, it was about you, your power, your ability to recognize that you do not need someone to step forward in order for you to feel whole. When you let go, they feel it. When you stop chasing, they notice, and in that space, they have to confront what they have been running from all along. But by then, something within you has changed. You are no longer waiting for them to break their silence. You have already broken free. And that is the moment everything shifts.